Welcome back to the Backwards History Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will, here with my co-host, Kevin. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Shut up, Kevin.
Under whose authority?
Mine.
And that's not good enough for me, so.
Well, looks like tonight we're under both government sanctions and a tornado watch. So this is dedication, folks.
Oh, yeah.
If we leave this house to go to a storm shelter, we're breaking curfew, which I'm sure several of you who listening are under the same restrictions.
Or very similar.
Very similar. But it's kind of what we wanted to talk about tonight. Government sanctions and government taking power from the people, as it were. Mm-hmm. And the history thereof. But first, little shameless plug time. Go follow us on Facebook at Backwards History. We've got a business page up now. Mm-hmm. Hit us up on Twitter at Backwards Histo. Mm-hmm. Email us at backwardshistorypodcast@gmail.com. Mm-hmm. And just a little heads up, here in the next couple weeks, we're going to be dropping a contest.
Oh, yeah. A lot of fun prizes.
Yep. We'll be announcing a little bit more detail later. And don't forget to go check out Mike Ramsey Music. He's the fellow who made that intro you just heard and the outro you'll hear at the end.
Oh, yeah.
But let's get moving with this. We're going to start off with Kevin talking about Julius Caesar.
Oh, yeah. As Will alluded to in the beginning of the podcast, right now the whole world is under what's known as a pandemic. And we have governments all over the world attempting to stem the virus to spread. And in doing so, they take, I guess you say, liberties from individuals in the name of safety and protecting the people and doing what needs to be done.
I think somebody famous said something about liberty and safety and exchanging them.
I believe they did, which was mentioned in a previous episode. So head on back a couple, see if you can find it.
I'm just going to cheat. It was Ben. It's good old Ben. Ben Franklin.
Oh, well. Anyway. Government taking emergency powers during a crisis is nothing new. Julius Caesar. I'm sure just about everybody alive has heard the name Julius Caesar.
But they usually equate it with E. Brute. But that's not our point.
That's kind of the end of the point, but we'll get there.
Well, that's with him getting the point.
A few times.
Hi-yo.
Anyway, when Julius Caesar came to power, there had been this long, bloody civil war, which he was, very much responsible for in the beginning. The Cliff Notes version is he'd been elected consul. His time was up. He wanted to keep power. So he wanted to win the people's admiration over. So he raises an army and goes to Gaul, which is modern-day France, and starts conquering. Anyway, he has a big army. He comes back. The powers that be are like, no, that's not cool.
So he had the gall to go to Gaul?
More or less.
Anyway.
More or less. Anyway, he comes back, and there's fighting all over the place. During this power struggle, the Roman people start to suffer. The civil war is causing a breakdown in basic society. People are starving, there's violence, unrest, civil unrest, there's just chaos. Anyway, so Caesar, when he comes back, after he's won power and he's trying to help the people in this time of need, he decides to declare himself dictator, which in Rome, they would elect a dictator, air quotes, for a very short amount of time.
Air quotes.
Caesar decides, you know what, I'm going to be dictator for 10 years. Because I know what's best, and this is what we're going to do. Now, as you might imagine, this doesn't sit very well with the Senate. Now, Rome was founded as a republic, and someone's coming in like, well, we're going to do things different now. I'm in charge, you're going to do what I say, and if you don't, well, what are you going to do about it, right? I have all the power.
The attempt on my life has left me scarred. Sorry, Star Wars reference.
Just a little one. Now, the most famous scene, or one of the most famous scenes of Shakespearean plays is Caesar being stabbed to death in the Senate. Well, that really did happen. He really was, shanked to death a couple of times there. It was by a smaller group of people. It was just a handful of senators, really. And there's really no historic evidence to suggest he said "E tu, Brute." Because if you've been stabbed several times, you ain't really talking. You're like, hey, who stabbed me? But yeah.
Which we mentioned in a prior episode.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, that's typically how these things go. Men will, or government, I should say, will amass power in the name of crisis and emergency and doing the right thing, but they rarely give it back.
Government is like a balloon.
Mm-hmm.
Once you blow it up, once it gets big,
mm-hmm.
it might shrink, but it will never shrink back down to where it once was.
Oh, no.
Another instance of government seizing power that's not theirs, but power in a crisis.
Mm-hmm.
More recent history.
Yeah, a little bit.
Is during the Great Depression. They actually made gold illegal to own.
By private citizens.
The government could own it.
Oh, they can own all of it.
But they wanted to print fiat currency. Federal Reserve currency.
It has value because I say it does.
Right. I'll let Kevin give a little bit more detail on that.
And then during the Depression in the 1930s, the country and the world itself really is everybody's broke, basically. The economy's in the slump, unemployment's sky high, people are homeless, starving in the streets, and you get a good old FDR comes along. All right, we have this emergency, we have this crisis. I'm going to do what I have to help. Now, one thing about FDR that sets him apart from other presidents is when Washington took office, he served for 8 years, or 2 terms. Every other president after that followed his example. Roosevelt was like, no, I'm going to have to stay in office because the country needs me to. And he broke tradition. Now, it wasn't until after his presidency that they changed it to where individual can only be president for 2 terms or no more than 10 years. Well, that's one example of how Roosevelt's like, well, I'm going to do things different. There's an emergency. The country needs me to be president. But when it comes to the Gold Act, the government's like, well, in order to fight inflation and to get the economy back to where it needs to be, we need to be in charge of the gold. Private citizens can't. That's what's hurting. So with a sign of a pen, it's now illegal to do what you've been doing all these years, just to have something. And again, it didn't really go over well with people because that's their savings. That's kind of like their safety net.
See, the thing about gold, that even today, I mean, it's legal to own gold again, obviously.
In case you were wondering.
Right. But the thing about gold is the government has no control over its value whatsoever. And it goes up with a bear market and goes down with a bull.
I think so. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, when the market goes down, the value of gold goes up. When the market goes up, the value of gold goes down. Granted, it still goes up. I think it still goes up, but up at a slower rate. But the government has no control of how much it's worth or anything else. Whereas fiat currency or Federal Reserve issued currency, they have full control over its value with inflation, deflation, the whole nine.
They control every aspect.
Which kind of is a parallel to something going on right now. But we're going to save that for later.
Little foreshadowing.
Because it's not quite my turn yet. Because another instance where power was seized by the federal government and not quite ever given back was during and after World War II. Once Congress declared war, all production was to turn to war production. I'm sure several of you know about people saving bacon grease and that kind of stuff for war production and whatever. It wasn't just that. And I'm going to let Kevin elaborate.
Yes, during World War II, the whole country goes to war. As Will alluded to, you have people rationing, you have people saving bacon grease, other items such as that, growing victory gardens to help ease the burden on food production. And one of the most famous stories is, with the men gone, the women went to the factories to, help out. One thing you really don't hear a lot about is the three big motor companies of the day, Ford, Chrysler, and GM, they all had wartime contracts with the government. But this is where the government is, it's not, we're going to sign a contract with you and we want these products produced. It's, no, you're going to sign this contract and you're going to produce this amount for us. Even though if you don't want to. Now, Henry Ford, who, for reasons if you listen to other episodes, might not have wanted to, be sending tanks and whatnot over to Europe.
Might be because there was a little blue oval on some of the Axis Powers vehicles. And that's a figurative oval, not the actually branded stuff, but there were Ford factories in Nazi Germany. Go back to a previous episode for that.
Oh, yeah. Now, while wartime contracts are very valuable, Ford was more outspoken about it. He wanted to focus on what his company makes, cars, vehicles like that. But here you have an example of the government during a crisis telling citizens, business owners, you have to produce this much for us. Kind of a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge, like, you're going to do it.
You're gonna do it because we are the government, and we have ways of making
like,
you.
We have to get this done. We need this. You're the guy that's gonna do it. Henry Ford's grandson was actually a serviceman, and he was pulled from active duty to go run Ford in place of his grandfather because they were so desperate for these materials. It's an example of the government, controlling production, which sounds very much like communism if you think about it. If you look at it on paper, government tells you how much you got to produce, no more, no less kind of thing. But again, it was done in the name of, helping the greater good. This has to be done where we need this. It's a crisis. And the government's going, we need this, so do you do it?
This is my turn.
Oh, yeah.
I want to say I'm not alone in feeling the way that I felt for the last week, a little bit into the week prior as well, but something's just not sitting right with me on the way that this outbreak is being handled. And I'm not sure if I could come up with a better way to handle it, if in fact it is as bad as we've been told or led to believe. I'm not saying it's not. Before I get into any of this, I'm not saying that this is not a real thing. Mm-hmm. The virus is real.
Oh, very much.
While numbers, or the way that stats and numbers are being presented, may not be, and may not be as honest as we would like for them to be.
Right.
Because, like, today, I was talking to somebody on Facebook. They're like, oh, the infection rate has increased tenfold. Da, 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 da. No. The testing rate has increased. The number of tests available has increased.
Your awareness has increased.
So while the infection rate may not have increased at all, the number of confirmed cases has increased merely because you have a method of finding them. Especially since this virus has a 2-week period. You could have it for 2 weeks and you would have no symptoms. Incubation, gestation, whatever the term is.
Tomato.
Right. But we see state governments, city governments, county governments all using fear and people's dependency on them to
justify,
take things that's not there. Kevin got here with 7 minutes to spare until our 10 o'clock curfew got into effect. Like, it's 10 to what?
6.
10 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
Some places are doing 24-hour curfews.
Sounds like house arrest, but okay.
So, technically, if I set one foot off of my driveway into the public street, right now, I'm committing a crime by being in public, regardless of whether I'm around anybody or not, because only essential travel is legal. If I wanted to get in my car and just go drive around to get out of the house, because I've been working from home for the last 2 weeks, I couldn't even do that.
Without breaking the law.
Right. If I just drove around, didn't get out of my car, and came right back to my house, I would still technically be breaking a law. The fact that our government is telling grown folks, you cannot leave your house between X time and X time for any reason.
Without incurring a fine.
For public safety is wrong. I get why they're doing it. Kind of.
I can see both sides, but yeah.
But grown folks get to make grown folks choices.
Right. Especially when they get taxed.
If I leave my house and I go somewhere around other people and I end up getting the Rona,
that's on you.
That's on me. But I have the free will and the quote-unquote God-given right to do it, regardless of public safety. Every infringement of our rights or our liberties is always explained away with public safety in mind. Think back to 9/11.
Oh, yeah.
Think back to the creation of Homeland Security.
Patriot Act.
The NSA and its spying on American citizens. The road to hell is paved in good intentions. But my question is, once this is all over, what happens to us?
What are the lasting ramifications?
When this balloon is deflated, what state is it going to be in? Because now they're trying to take away cash currency, give you an all digital currency, courtesy of the Federal Reserve, just like the fiat currency you were given before. That gives the Federal Reserve full access to all of your funds at any time. Look at what happens constantly to things like Social Security. Oh, we're a little short on this program. Let's just take it from Social Security. What's to stop them from saying, oh, we're just going to take a percentage of everybody's money all at once? Oh, you got to pay back that coronavirus relief.
Stimulus. That's
stimulus. Granted, I like the stimulus better because it actually goes to the American people as opposed to just corporations.
Right. That's a step in the right direction.
So, like, those who pay into it get benefit out of it. Right. Those who paid the taxes by majority.
Get something.
Exactly. And I'm better with that than the 2008 stimuluses that were given, because the American people saw nothing but the increased prices.
Bailouts.
Right. But I'm just going to leave you with the question of, when this is all said and done, how much of the power that has been given to the governments, whether they be federal, state, county, city, whatever, how much of the power that has been given will be given back? I'm not so sure that we're going to be comfortable with that, with the amount that's given back. But, as always, I don't want you to take our word for anything. Don't want you to take us as experts. We're just two dudes in a microphone. So as always, do your own research. Form your own opinions. Trust, but verify.